Chapter 6: A Tender Night on the Porch. The chill of late autumn deepened with each passing day in Montana, the daylight shrinking as the wind tore through the plains. Barely 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky was already sinking into deep indigo, the distant Rocky Mountains first veiled in a thin lavender mist, then slowly swallowed by the dusk. The farm work had settled into a steady rhythm, Leah and Logan moving in perfect sync without needing to speak. A lift of the hand, a turn of the body, and they knew exactly what the other would do next. Their understanding had grown like the grass along the field ridges, quiet and unassuming, weaving its way into every part of their daily lives. Mornings always began with the low moo of the cattle. Leah would get up first and put on a pot of coffee, and by the time the rich aroma filled the house, Logan would be standing in the kitchen doorway, taking the feed bucket from her hands. They'd walk to the cowshed one after the other, him topping up the hay and fixing the water troughs, his strength steady and sure, her checking on the cow's health and mucking out the bedding, meticulous and practiced. By the time the first pale light streaked the sky, the tractor would be rumbling to life, Logan driving to plow the fields, Leah sitting in the passenger seat marking out the plots. The wind would blow her golden hair across his shoulder, and he'd tilt his head slightly away, his movements gentle, like he was afraid to disturb something fragile. At noon, when the sun was at its warmest, they'd eat a simple lunch on the ridge of the field: sandwiches, boiled eggs, and a thermos of hot coffee. Leah would tell him which parts of the field had the highest yield, which old cottonwood tree her father had planted with his own hands. Logan would listen, quiet for the most part, occasionally pointing out issues with the soil, reminding her of the best times to irrigate, every word precise and on point, never showing off, never hiding what he knew. Old Joe saw it, and would often shake his head with a smile, saying the two of them fit together better than the wheat fields and the sunshine. But what truly drew their hearts closer, little by little, were the evenings on the porch. Once the day's work was done, they'd always fall into the habit of sitting in the old wooden chairs on the porch. Leah had pulled 2 chairs close together, with a small tin table between them, holding 2 bottles of cold beer and a plate of peanuts. The wind would blow across the wheat fields, carrying the faint scent of straw and damp earth, the sunset painting the sky in streaks of tangerine, soft pink, and pale gold, the edges of the clouds gilded with light. Even the air itself seemed to slow down. At first it was just silence. Each with a beer in hand, staring out at the horizon, no words needed, no awkwardness to be found. Leah was too tired to talk, simply letting her shoulders, tight with tension all day, relax into the chair. Logan seemed to be savoring the rare peace, far from the noise and the demands and the endless calculations, with nothing but the wind and the sound of their breathing. But the silence slowly warmed, no longer the distant wariness of when they'd first met, but a quiet, comforting companionship. Leah was the first to open up. That day she dug out her parents' old photo album, her fingertips brushing the yellowed edges of the pictures, and a sigh had escaped her before she could stop it. Logan had turned to look at her at once, his gaze holding no prying questions, only quiet patience. That look was so gentle, so safe, that it split her chest open, and all the grief she'd bottled up for 2 years came flooding out. "This farm was my great-grandfather's. I'm the 4th generation to run it," she said, her voice soft, her gaze fixed on the wheat field stretching out before them. "I used to run around here all the time when I was little. My dad taught me to drive my first tractor, my mom set flowers on the porch and baked apple pies. Back then the farm was big and busy. The silos were always full, the cowshed always full of new calves." She spoke slowly, of the warmth of her childhood, of her father's cancer diagnosis, how it had wiped out their savings and left them drowning in debt. Of her mother's sudden death, how she'd gone from a girl who was loved and cared for to the sole owner of the farm overnight. Of the bank's relentless collections, Blackstone Agribusiness circling like vultures, the gossip that spread through the town like wildfire. Of the countless nights she'd sat right here on this porch, staring up at the stars, terrified she wouldn't be able to hold on to the home her parents had left her. She didn't cry. Her voice was just a little rough, thick with the exhaustion of years of holding it all alone. She'd never said any of this to old Joe, never to anyone in town. She was afraid of their pity, afraid they'd think she was weak, afraid they'd tell her to just give up. But with Logan, she didn't have to be strong. She didn't have to pretend. Logan listened the whole time, never interrupting, never offering empty platitudes. When she paused, he simply handed her another beer, quiet and steady. By the time she finished speaking, the porch had sunk into the dusk, only the faint warm glow of the light in the barn in the distance. "You're incredible," he said finally, his voice low and sincere. "Holding on this long, protecting this land all by yourself. Not everyone could do that." Leah froze. Everyone had always told her to sell the farm, to move to the city, to stop being so stubborn. He was the first person to tell her she was incredible. Those 4 simple words meant more than any comfort ever could, and her eyes burned. She quickly turned her head away, pretending to watch the last of the light fade from the sky. Logan didn't call her out on it. Instead, he slowly opened up a corner of his own heart. "Every part of my life was planned out for me, from the day I was born," he said, staring up at the darkening sky, his tone flat like he was talking about someone else's life. "What school I'd go to, what I'd study, who I could spend time with, what I'd do with my future. It was all decided for me. I never got to choose. I wasn't allowed to. Everyone envied what I had, but they never saw that I was trapped in a cage, not even allowed to pick which direction to walk." He didn't say who he was, where he'd come from, what he was running from. He only spoke of being tired of the life laid out for him, of wanting to escape, to find a place where no one knew his name, where he could just live quiet and unburdened. "That night in the rain, I thought I'd freeze to death in that ditch." He turned his head to look at her, his eyes bright and clear in the dim light. "You picked me up. You gave me a place where I don't have to wear a mask, where I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. It's quiet here. It's safe. It's better than any place I've ever been." Leah's heart gave a soft, trembling jolt. She'd always thought he'd come to save her, but in that moment she understood. They'd both been drowning in their own struggles, and they'd caught each other. The wind picked up, a little colder, and Leah huddled her shoulders slightly. Logan immediately took off his flannel shirt, draping it gently over her shoulders. The fabric carried his scent, a faint mix of tobacco and sunshine, and when it wrapped around her, warmth spread from her shoulders all the way down to the tips of her toes. She didn't push it off. She didn't say anything. She just lowered her head slightly, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. The night stretched on, soft and tender around them. They talked about plans for the farm, about which wheat varieties to plant next year, about the funny little stories and characters in town, about their favorite weather, about the stars above. They rarely touched on the pain of the past, never pushed for the secrets the other wouldn't share. They only talked about the here and now, about this moment, about the wheat fields around them. The words came easier, the silences fewer, laughter occasionally breaking through the quiet of the farm, floating away on the wind. Logan listened as she rambled about her mother's apple pie recipe, about the time she'd snuck next door to pick strawberries and gotten chased all the way home by the neighbor's dog. Leah listened as he explained the mechanics of the tractors, as he talked about the differences in soil across the country, as he broke down the complexities of farm management into simple, easy words. She noticed he wasn't just capable and steady, but incredibly attentive too. He remembered she didn't like her beer ice cold, remembered she was always nicking her hands when fixing the equipment, remembered she got sleepy in the evenings, and would quietly shift his chair closer to the lamp so she could see better. She slowly came to see the quiet tenderness beneath his silence. He never spoke sweet nothings, but when she was so tired she could barely stand, he'd silently take the tools from her hands. When the town gossip got to her, he'd quietly accompany her into town, his aura shielding her from every sideways glance and unkind word. When the debt collector showed up, he'd step in front of her without a second thought, blocking every threat from reaching her. His tenderness wasn't loud, wasn't overwhelming. It was like the Montana starlight in the dead of night, quiet, steady, and unwavering. Without either of them noticing, the evenings on the porch had become the part of the day they both looked forward to most. No matter how tired, how frustrated they were during the day, sitting in those old wooden chairs with each other at their side, the wind would blow all the weariness away. Sometimes old Joe would stay for a beer, watching the way they smiled at each other with a knowing look in his eye. He'd finish his drink and make an excuse to leave, leaving the long night to the two of them. The farm dog would lie at their feet, its tail sweeping softly across the porch floor, the light in the barn glowing steady, the wheat fields rippling in the wind. The whole world was quiet, nothing but the sound of each other's voices. That night, the moon was exceptionally bright, painting the wheat fields in silver. Leah stared up at the stars and said softly, "When I was little, I always thought the Montana stars were the brightest in the whole world. My parents said that as long as we held on to this land, the stars would always shine down on us." Logan turned to look at her. The moonlight fell across her face, softening her features until she looked almost ethereal. Something shifted in his chest and he spoke, his voice so quiet it was only for the two of them to hear. "They will. They always will." It wasn't just the stars. He would too. He didn't say the words out loud, but the certainty and tenderness in his eyes said it all. Leah met his gaze, and her heart skipped a beat. The night was too soft, the wind too gentle, his eyes too deep. She was frozen in place, unable to look away. There was a faint, trembling tension in the air now, no longer just the easy camaraderie of partners, but something blooming between them, something neither of them dared to name. She quickly looked down, pretending to take a sip of her beer, the tips of her ears burning hot. Logan looked away too, his fingertips brushing the neck of the beer bottle, a faint smile on his lips. He knew something had changed. He'd come here to run away, but now he didn't want to be just a passing stranger anymore. He wanted to stay. Here in these wheat fields on this porch by her side. The night was long, and the tenderness longer still. The light on the porch burned late into the night, the two beer bottles empty, the peanut plate wiped clean, but the words still hadn't run out. They talked from the first fall of dusk, till the moon hung high in the sky, till their eyelids grew heavy, still reluctant to get up and go inside. Leah finally yawned, her eyes glistening with tired tears. Logan spoke softly. "You should get some sleep. We've got an early start tomorrow." She nodded, standing up and handing his shirt back to him. Their fingertips brushed accidentally, and both of them froze for a split second, before pulling away like nothing had happened, acting casual. "Good night, Logan." "Good night, Leah." She turned and walked into the main house, her steps light. He sat on the porch alone for a long time after that, watching the light in her bedroom window turn on, then slowly fade to black. Night wrapped around the farm completely, the wheat fields rippling silently in the moonlight, the stars spilling across the entire sky. The chairs on the porch still held the warmth of their bodies. The words left unspoken, like seeds buried in the soil, had taken root and sprouted in the tender nourishment of that long night. Two hearts, once lonely, weary, and clinging to their own battles, had drawn closer with every passing night on that porch, beneath the Montana wheat fields, until they could never be pulled apart again. Chapter 7: Turning the Tide on the Blight Crisis. Late autumn in Montana should have been a time for the wheat fields to rest and build up their strength for the coming year. But a sudden, devastating pest and disease outbreak hit like a bucket of ice water, freezing Leah to the core. Old Joe was the first to spot the trouble. During his early morning patrol of the fields, he found that dozens of acres of wheat seedlings near the river valley had yellowed, curled leaves dotted with tiny pinprick holes, their edges coated in a light brown mold. When he crushed a leaf between his fingers, it crumbled to powder. At first he'd written it off as natural wilting from the cooling weather, but by the time he'd followed the ridge all the way down the field, his face had turned to stone. The blighted area was spreading fast. In just a single morning it had consumed nearly 200 acres, its ferocity terrifying. When Leah reached the field, she froze on the spot. The wheat seedlings that should have been lush and vibrant lay wilted in swaths. A patchwork of sickly yellow and brown like an ugly scar burned into the endless expanse of farmland. The wind blew and diseased leaves rained down, the air thick with a heavy musty rot. This was her only hope for next year's harvest, the very lifeline of the farm. Since her parents had passed, she'd gritted her teeth and fought through every hardship on the back of these wheat fields. If they were destroyed, she wouldn't just be unable to pay back the loan. She wouldn't even be able to keep the farm running at all. What's happening?" Leah dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she picked up a handful of withered seedlings, her voice shaking uncontrollably. They were fine last week. How did they get like this overnight? Old Joe's brow was furrowed tight, his face grave. Looks like wheat rust and aphids hit at the same time, a rare mixed infestation. It's moving so fast, I've never seen anything this vicious in my life. That afternoon, Leah called the town's agricultural extension agent at once. But after walking the fields, taking samples, and running tests, he just shook his head, his voice heavy with regret. Leah, it's not that I don't want to help. This kind of mixed disease is extremely rare here in Montana. The standard pesticides we have on hand won't even put a dent in it. On top of that, it's spreading so fast that in a few days, it'll infect the entire 1,000-acre field. By then, there'll be no coming back from it. Isn't there anything we can do? Leah grabbed the agent's arm, her eyes brimming with desperate pleas. This is everything I have. Please just think of something. There's nothing more I can do, the agent sighed, pulling his arm free. My advice? Start preparing for the worst. Call a straw disposal company now to cut your losses. If you wait till it's a total loss, you won't even make back the money you spent on seed. His words hit like a sledgehammer to Leah's chest. She stood frozen on the ridge, staring at the withering wheat field stretching out before her, the world spinning around her, all the strength draining from her body. The threats from the debt collectors, Blackstone Agribusiness circling like vultures, the town gossip, the suffocating weight of the loan, all of it crashed down on her at once, wrapping around her like a vice. She couldn't hold on any longer. She dropped to the ground, her shoulders shaking violently, silent tears falling into the dirt. 2 years. She'd held on alone for 2 whole years. She'd weathered the storms, the bitter cold, the loneliness no one understood. But in the end, she couldn't outrun this sudden act of God. Was the Carter farm really going to die with her? A warm, strong hand came to rest gently on her shoulder. Leah looked up, straight into Logan's deep, steady eyes. He'd appeared behind her without her noticing, his clothes still dusted with dirt and wheat chaff, clearly having rushed straight from fixing the farm equipment. He didn't offer empty words of comfort. He just knelt down, picked up a diseased seedling, and studied the blight and insect damage on the leaves with intense focus, his fingertips brushing the surface lightly, his expression calm and concentrated. There's a way, he said, his voice low and certain, a sedative that instantly calmed Leah's racing heart. It's just that the agricultural resources in this town are too limited to handle this rare mixed infestation. I know the top agricultural disease experts in California. Their lab specializes in these hard-to-treat blights. I'll call them right now, get a precise treatment plan remotely. Leah stared at him through tear-blurred eyes, her voice cracking. Really, really? Even the town agent said there's nothing we can do. Trust me. Logan looked at her, his gaze unshakable. Give me 3 hours, and I'll have a solution. In the meantime, have old Joe set up a buffer zone between the infected areas and the healthy fields. No people or equipment cross between them. Slow the spread first. He didn't waste a second. The words were barely out of his mouth before he turned and headed straight for the farm's storage shed, where the landline had the strongest signal. He didn't use his broken cell phone, borrowing the farm's phone instead to dial a number thousands of miles away. Leah stood on the ridge, watching Logan's back as he talked on the phone at the shed door. His tone was steady, his words rapid, speaking in technical jargon-heavy terms that went right over her head, describing the symptoms, soil conditions, temperature and humidity data with pinpoint accuracy. This wasn't the knowledge of an ordinary farmhand. She had no idea who Logan was talking to, no idea if the top experts he spoke of could really save the wheat fields. But in this moment of utter despair, his presence was her only light. 2 hours and 47 minutes later, Logan hung up the phone and walked quickly back to the field, a sheet of paper covered in a dense, detailed plan in his hand. Got it, he said, the tension in his voice easing slightly, though the urgency remained. It's a stripe rust fungus outbreak mixed with a massive aphid infestation, common across North America. Luckily, we caught it before it's too late. Follow this formula for the treatment, and we'll have the spread under control in 3 days, and fully cleared up in a week. He handed the plan to Leah. It laid out the exact pesticide ratios, spraying times, operating procedures, and field management details with perfect clarity, even down to strict requirements for water temperature, wind speed, and spraying angle. It was impeccably professional. But we can't get any of these pesticides in town. Leah scanned the plan quickly, her heart sinking again. The farm supply store only has the standard stuff, none of these specialized formulas. I'll handle it. Logan didn't hesitate for a second. I already contacted the state's emergency agricultural supply depot. They have the chemicals in stock. They'll airdrop them to the empty field near the farm by helicopter in half an hour. We won't miss the optimal spraying window. Airdropping pesticides by helicopter? Leah froze completely. This level of coordination and logistics wasn't something an ordinary person could pull off. She stared at the calm, composed man in front of her, curiosity surging in her chest again. But with the wheat fields on the brink of disaster, there was no time to dwell on it. She could only choose to trust him, unconditionally. Logan jumped into action at once, coordinating every step. He had Old Joe and the others rush to set up the buffer zones and clear the weeds from the fields to reduce the pest breeding grounds, while he drove to the drop zone to wait for the chemicals, checking all the sprayers and calibrating their pressure to make sure they were in perfect working order. Everything unfolded with methodical precision under his direction. The farm, once paralyzed by panic and despair, suddenly had a steady hand at the wheel. As evening fell, a small helicopter roared over the wheat fields, dropping several sealed crates of chemicals onto the designated empty lot. Logan drove back with the supplies himself, mixing the formula exactly as the plan specified, before hefting a sprayer onto his back and walking straight into the blighted fields. Leah grabbed a sprayer and followed right behind him, only for Logan to stop her in her tracks. "You coordinate the water supply and the crew rotations," he said, his hand firm on her shoulder, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The chemicals have mild irritants. You shouldn't be exposed to them for long periods." His concern was straightforward and warm. Leah's throat tightened and she nodded, turning to handle the logistics instead. The sky grew dark, and every floodlight on the farm was switched on, their bright white glow illuminating the entire wheat field. Logan walked at the front, the heavy sprayer on his back, his steps steady, his spraying even, not missing a single inch of the field. His movements were precise and expert, following the exact angle and distance the experts had specified, more disciplined than even a professional agricultural technician. Old Joe followed behind him, more amazed with every passing minute. This young man didn't just understand the treatment plans and logistics. His hands-on work in the field was flawless, like he'd been born to work the land. The night deepened, the temperature plummeted, the cold wind stinging their faces. But no one complained of being tired. Logan sprayed non-stop through the night, sweat soaking through his shirt only to go cold in the wind. The old wound on his forehead throbbed with the constant movement, but he didn't even notice. His only thought was to get the disease under control as fast as possible, to protect Leah's hope. Leah brought out hot water and hot coffee every half hour, watching Logan's busy back, her heart aching and warm all at once. She knew this man was giving everything he had to help her hold onto these wheat fields, to hold onto her home. They didn't sleep a wink all night. Logan, Old Joe, and a handful of neighbors from town who'd come to help worked in rotating shifts, spraying through the night. By dawn, every single infected area and high-risk zone had been fully treated. The second he set down the sprayer, Logan leaned against the field ridge, exhausted. His face was pale, his lips chapped, his body completely drained. Leah hurried to his side, handing him a warm towel and a glass of water, her eyes burning red again as she looked at his tired face. "Thank you, Logan. So much." "It's fine." Logan took the glass, took a sip, his voice rough but still certain. "Over the next 3 days, we keep up the management plan from the protocol, clear out any diseased plants promptly. The fields will bounce back. I promise." For the next 3 days, Logan stayed in the fields from dawn till dusk. He patrolled the fields every morning before the sun came up, tracking the progress of the disease, adjusting the management details, and personally overseeing every follow-up spraying, not letting a single detail slip through the cracks. Leah stayed by his side, watching the once yellowed, wilted seedlings come back to life day by day, their leaves unfurling, the mold fading, the aphids gone. Hope rekindled in her chest, where despair had once taken root. On the 7th morning, as the first rays of sunlight spilled over the wheat fields, Leah stood on the ridge, staring out at the lush, vibrant green seedlings stretching to the horizon, and couldn't hold back the tears of joy. The devastating outbreak had been completely contained. The 1,000-acre wheat field was safe. Next year's harvest was secure. The farm would live on. Old Joe stood beside her, bowing repeatedly to Logan, his face full of awe and gratitude. "Son, you're the savior of the Carter farm. Without you, this whole field would have been gone." Logan just smiled faintly, taking no credit for it. His eyes were fixed on Leah beside him, her face alight with unbridled joy, her smile as bright as the Montana sun, lighting up the entire field. Seeing her happy, he thought, every bit of exhaustion and hardship over these past days was worth it. Leah turned to Logan, her eyes brimming with gratitude and tenderness. She walked slowly to him, stopping right in front of him on the ridge, and spoke with solemn, heartfelt sincerity. "Logan, thank you. Thank you for saving the wheat fields. For saving me. If it hadn't been for him, she would have been broken beyond repair by now, with no strength left to keep going." Logan looked into her shining eyes, his heart skipping a beat. He lifted his hand, gently brushing a piece of wheat chaff from her hair, his fingertips brushing her cheek by accident, leaving a warm, tingling sensation in their wake. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his voice low, his gaze soft. "I told you. I'd help you hold on to this home." The wind blew across the wheat fields, sending ripples of green rolling through the grass. The sun fell over the two of them, stretching their shadows long across the ridge. After that brush with disaster, Leah's trust and reliance on Logan had taken root deep in her heart. And the feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface had finally broken through, carried on the back of his desperate, heroic stand to save the farm. The Montana wheat fields had returned to their former vitality, and the distance between two hearts, forged in the fire of fighting side by side, had grown closer than ever. They could never be pulled apart again. Chapter 8: A Heart-Skipped Beat at the Harvest Festival. Red Willow Town's Harvest Festival was the most anticipated event of late autumn in Montana. The months of backbreaking farm work had finally come to an end. The wheat was in the silos, the livestock settled in their pens, and the entire town put down their tools to gather in the square at the heart of town. Colorful banners hung from the telephone poles, the rich scent of grilled sausages and hard apple cider drifting down every street. Kids chased each other with balloons, old men sat on benches chatting about the weather and the harvest, and a band played upbeat country music on a makeshift stage, the melody light and lively. Leah had put on a cream-colored knit dress that morning, paired with short leather boots. Her long hair, usually dusted with dirt and wheat chaff, was twisted up softly at the nape of her neck, revealing the delicate line of her throat. She stood in front of the mirror, fidgeting with the hem of her dress, her heart racing for no reason at all. Today, she was going to the harvest festival with Logan. Ever since the blight crisis had passed, the atmosphere on the farm had grown warmer, softer, easier. The thin, fragile line between them was ready to break with the slightest touch, yet neither of them had made the first move. It just hung in the air, thick and sweet, in the lingering glances, the accidental brushes of hands, the late-night talks on the porch, growing stronger with every passing day. When Logan knocked on her bedroom door, Leah's breath caught in her throat. He traded his usual work clothes for a dark gray knit sweater and dark trousers, his tall frame and sharp features on full display. His skin, usually warmed by the sun, looked even more striking in the soft light. The scar on his forehead faded to a pale pink that only added to his rugged charm. When he saw Leah all dressed up, a clear flash of awe crossed his face, his voice softening without him even realizing it. "You ready? We can head out whenever." Leah nodded, the tips of her ears burning, and followed him out to the farm's pickup truck. They drove down the country road, the harvested wheat fields stretching out on either side, the sun warm, the wind carrying the sweet scent of ripening fruit. Logan rolled down the window, and country music drifted in on the breeze. They didn't say much, but the air between them hummed with a quiet, charged tension. The square was packed with people when they arrived, and Leah instinctively stepped closer to Logan's side. He slowed his pace naturally, turning his body slightly to shield her from the crowd, the movement so smooth it was like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "Anything you want to eat?" he asked, leaning down to speak to her. His voice cut through the music and the noise, clear and warm. "I want to get an apple pie." Leah's eyes lit up like a kid handed a piece of candy. "Mrs. Martha makes the best apple pie in the whole town." Logan smiled and nodded, following her through the crowd to the food stall. As they waited in line, half the town cast curious glances their way, whispers drifting over on the wind. Leah tensed for a second, but she didn't feel the usual unease, not with Logan at her side, steady and reliable, making her feel fearless. When Mrs. Martha saw them, she handed over 2 warm apple pies with a bright smile, her eyes darting between the two of them, her grin knowing. "Leah, you look beautiful today. Logan, you take good care of our girl." Leah's face burned bright red. She took the pies, mumbled a thank you, and practically dragged Logan over to a bench on the edge of the square. The warm apple pie was flaky on the outside, tender on the inside, sweet without being cloying. Leah took a small bite, a smudge of sugar sticking to the corner of her mouth, completely unaware. Logan watched her, his eyes soft, and reached out without thinking, brushing the sugar away with the pad of his thumb. The second their skin touched, both of them froze. The air seemed to stand still for a heartbeat, the sound of their own pounding hearts deafening in their ears. Leah lifted her head sharply, her gaze crashing into his deep eyes, filled with a soft, overwhelming tenderness that made her chest feel tight and light all at once. She quickly looked down again, staring at her apple pie, her heart threatening to beat right out of her chest. Logan pulled his hand back, his fingertips still tingling from the soft warmth of her skin, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Just then, a sharp, sneering voice cut through the air from nearby. "Well, look who it is, Leah Carter." A group of young men in flashy shirts leaned against the railing, their eyes mocking as they flicked over Logan. "What's this? Found yourself an out-of-town deadbeat to mooch off you? Even dragged him to the harvest festival for a free ride?" The man speaking was Tom, the son of one of the biggest farm owners in town. He'd had his eye on Leah's farm for years, and after being turned down time and time again, he'd made a point of targeting her at every opportunity. Seeing her with the strange man at her side only made him more vicious with his jabs. Laughter erupted around them, every eye in the vicinity turning to stare, curious and mocking. Leah's face went pale, her hand tightening around the apple pie, anger and humiliation burning in her chest. She didn't care if people called her poor, if they said she couldn't hold on to the farm. But she couldn't stand to hear them insult Logan like this. But Logan didn't look angry at all. He just patted the back of her hand gently, silently telling her not to worry. He stood up, his gaze calm as he looked at Tom, his tone even. "The harvest festival is for the whole town. Anyone can come." "Sure they can come," Tom scoffed, jerking his chin toward the arena in the center of the square. "But if you're gonna hang around her, you gotta prove you're not just a freeloader. Enter the rodeo. Win it and I'll apologize. Lose and you get the hell away from Leah, you hear?" The rodeo was the main event of the Red Willow Harvest Festival, a test of riding skill, strength, and nerve. Only the toughest cowboys walked away with the championship, and it was the highest honor a man in town could earn. Everyone waited for Logan to back down, to make a fool of himself. In their eyes, this quiet, refined stranger from out of town couldn't even climb onto a horse, let alone compete in a rodeo. Leah jumped up, grabbing Logan's arm, whispering urgently, "Ignore him. Let's just go." But Logan just looked down at her and smiled, his eyes steady and sure. "Wait right here. I'll bring you home a championship." He turned and walked to the sign-up table, writing his name down in quick, neat strokes. The square went quiet for a beat, before erupting into even louder whoops and jeers. Tom just smirked, crossing his arms, ready to watch this stranger get thrown off a bull and humiliate himself. The rodeo started soon after. Bronc riding, calf roping, and bull riding unfolded one after another, with Logan scheduled to compete last. When he rode out on the horse provided by the event organizers, the noise in the square died down almost instantly. He sat tall and straight in the saddle, his posture perfect and steady, his eyes sharp and calm, not a hint of nerves or panic in his face. The reins moved fluidly in his hands, the horse responding to his every command, docile and obedient, nothing like the skittish, bucking mounts the other riders had struggled with. In the bronc riding event, he tamed the wildest horse in the lineup with effortless calm and flawless technique. In the calf roping, his throws were fast and precise, lassoing the target every single time, his speed leaving the other competitors in the dust. And in the most dangerous event of all, bull riding, he held on tight to the bucking, raging bull, not moving an inch until the buzzer sounded, dismounting smoothly and unshaken. With every event he completed, the square erupted into deafening cheers and applause. Leah stood at the front of the crowd, her hands clasped tight over her chest, her eyes glued to Logan in the arena. The sun fell over him, highlighting the sharp lines of his body, every movement clean and powerful, so handsome it made her heart race out of control. She'd never known that this quiet, gentle man could be so dazzling, so full of raw, unbridled power. In the end, Logan took the rodeo championship by a landslide, with the highest score in the event's history. When the announcer handed him the championship trophy and a bouquet of golden wheat stalks, the square went wild. Tom stood in the crowd, his face white as a sheet, unable to say a single word, before he slunk away through the people. Logan didn't stop to celebrate. He took the trophy and the wheat, and walked straight to Leah. He stopped right in front of her, holding out both the trophy and the wheat to her, his eyes bright with a warm, tender smile. "For you." Leah held the heavy trophy and the warm wheat stalks in her arms, staring up at the man in front of her, his forehead glistening with sweat, his smile bright enough to outshine the sun. She felt like she was floating in warm water, her heart completely melting. The cheers, the music, the noise of the crowd all faded away, until there was nothing left in the world but him. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears, her voice soft and wobbly. "Logan, you were incredible." "Only for you," he murmured. 4 words, light as the wind, but they hit Leah square in the chest, heavy and warm. As evening fell, the festival bonfire was lit. The whole town joined hands, dancing in a circle around the flames, singing and laughing into the night sky. Leah didn't join the crowd. She sat with Logan on a small hill overlooking the square, watching the chaos and joy unfold below them. The light from the bonfire painted the side of Logan's face, warm and bright. Leah turned to look at him, her heart racing faster and faster, the feelings she'd bottled up for so long impossible to hide any longer. From the rainy night she'd pulled him from the ditch, to him staying on quietly, working to repay her kindness. To his stunning expertise holding the farm together, to him turning the tide on the blight that would have ruined her. To him standing up for her at the festival, winning the championship just for her. Every moment flashed through her mind, warm, steady, safe, and achingly tender, filling her heart to the brim. She finally understood. She'd fallen in love with this mysterious, powerful, gentle, reliable man a long time ago. Logan felt her gaze, turning his head to meet hers. Their eyes locked, the bonfire and the starlight glowing between them. His eyes were deep, like the Montana night sky, filled with tenderness and quiet resolve. The air between them grew thick and charged, their breaths mixing, their heartbeats falling into the same rhythm. Neither of them spoke, but they both knew exactly what was in the other's heart. Leah's breath hitched. She bit down on her lower lip instinctively, her eyes wide and flustered, yet unable to look away. She could smell his scent, the faint mix of tobacco and sunshine, feel the warmth radiating off his body, and she felt lightheaded like she was floating. Logan leaned in slowly, his fingertips brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, his voice low and rough. "Leah." His voice was thick with a tenderness he could no longer hold back, with a longing he'd buried for far too long. Leah closed her eyes, her long lashes trembling softly, her heart in her throat. The wind was soft, the bonfire crackled, and the stars spilled over the hilltop. She knew, in this moment, everything was finally going to fall into place. She didn't fight it, didn't panic. She just waited, quiet and still, for the feelings that had taken root in the wheat fields, grown through the storms to finally bloom soft and sweet. Chapter 9: A Kiss in the Storm. Summer thunderstorms hit without warning in Montana. One minute the sky was clear and blue, the next it was blotted out entirely by heavy roiling storm clouds. The wind whipped the wheat fields into a frenzy, the tops of the trees bending nearly in half, and deep, rumbling thunder rolled across the entire Montana plain, drawing closer with every passing second. Leah stood on the porch, staring up at the sky, her stomach dropping. The barn still held the farm equipment they'd just finished servicing, the hay for the winter, and several bags of seed that hadn't been moved into the silo yet. If the storm flooded the barn, the damage would be catastrophic. "I'll go reinforce the barn doors and windows and move the hay up higher," she said, grabbing a raincoat off the wall, her voice tight with urgency. Logan grabbed her wrist at once, taking the raincoat from her and pulling it on himself, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The wind's too strong. You stay inside. I'll handle it." "No, there's too much to do, you can't do it alone." Leah pulled her wrist free, grabbing a jacket and sprinting out into the rain. "We'll be faster together." Logan couldn't stop her, and hurried to catch up. Fat, heavy raindrops slammed down at once, stinging where they hit the skin. The two of them fought their way through the howling wind and driving rain to the barn, and had just slammed the doors shut and bolted them tight when a searing flash of white lightning split the sky, slamming straight into the barn roof. Crack, boom. The sound of electricity tearing through wood was followed by a burst of flame, the dry hay catching fire instantly, thick black smoke filling the barn in seconds. The flames raced up the wooden beams, the crackle of burning wood mixing with the thunder, deafening. "Fire? The barn's on fire." Leah's face went white with terror, and she made to rush inside without thinking. Logan grabbed her hard, his shout cutting through the roar of the storm. "It's too dangerous. Wait till the fire dies down. The equipment, the hay, the seed are all in there." Leah's eyes filled with frantic tears. "It's the farm's whole year. Everything we have." She stared at the flames spreading faster by the second, the wooden structure groaning and cracking, the smoke billowing into the sky, and felt a hand close around her heart squeezing until she couldn't breathe. This was the barn her father had built, the lifeblood of the farm. She couldn't just stand by and watch it burn to ash. Before Logan could stop her again, Leah bent down, covered her mouth and nose, and ran straight into the burning building. "Leah!" Logan's eyes went wide with horror, and he didn't hesitate for a second, sprinting in right after her. The thick smoke burned the lungs, making it impossible to breathe. Flames licked at every corner, the wooden beams creaking and swaying, ready to collapse at any moment. Logan spotted Leah instantly in the firelight, straining to drag a heavy hay bale across the floor, her hair wild, her clothes soaked through, her face streaked with ash, still gritting her teeth and refusing to give up. He rushed over, yanking her behind him, his voice hoarse but unshakable. "I'll move the hay. You get outside now." "I'm not leaving without you." She refused to let go, and together they hauled the heavy hay bale toward the door. They ran back and forth through the flames, ignoring the searing heat and falling embers, carrying out the equipment, the seed, the hay, one piece at a time. The rain poured down on them, mixing with sweat and ash, leaving them soaked from head to toe. Logan put himself between Leah and the worst of the fire every step of the way, his arms and shoulders burned red and raw by flying embers, but he didn't even notice. His only thought was keeping Leah safe. The second the last hay bale was dragged outside, a charred, burning wooden beam above them came crashing down. Logan reacted instantly, yanking Leah hard against his chest, turning his back to take the full force of the blow. A dull, heavy thud echoed out as the beam slammed into his back, bouncing off and hitting the ground, sending a shower of sparks flying. "Logan?" Leah clung to him in terror, her voice shaking. "Are you okay? Did you get hurt?" "I'm fine," he gasped, holding her tight against him. "We need to get out of here, now. The whole barn's coming down." They stumbled out of the barn, supporting each other, and had only taken a few steps when a deafening crash rang out behind them. The entire barn collapsed, consumed by fire. The storm still raged, the rain pouring down, lightning flashing across the sky and illuminating the whole farm. Leah held on to Logan, standing in the rain, both of them soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her face and neck, rain dripping steadily off her chin. She looked up at the man in front of her, his shoulders broad, his back bruised purple and black from the beam, his arms covered in burns, his face streaked with ash and rain, yet he still stood straight and tall, like a mountain that would never fall. The image of him shielding her with his body in the fire played over and over in her head. Her heart raced, slamming against her ribs, all the reliance, trust, gratitude, and love she'd been holding back breaking through every last wall of restraint, washed clean by the storm and the fire. Logan looked down at her too. The rain had soaked her eyelashes, her nose pink, her lips trembling slightly. Her bright blue eyes were filled with panic, relief, and a flood of raw, unbridled affection that he couldn't miss. Every moment of the past 6 months crashed over him in an instant. The rainy night he'd been pulled from the ditch, the quiet days working side by side, the long talks on the porch, the harvest festival, the fight to save the wheat fields. Every memory tangled together, and he couldn't hold back the feelings surging in his chest any longer. He lifted his hand, his fingertips brushing the rain and ash from her face, his touch impossibly gentle. "You scared the hell out of me," he said, his voice rough, trembling with the aftershock of what had just happened. Leah stared up at him, her breath coming fast, unable to say a single word. She just lifted herself up on her tiptoes, leaning toward him without thinking. The rain fell all around them, the thunder fading into the distance. Logan couldn't hold back any longer. He leaned down, his hands cupping her face gently, and kissed her. It wasn't a tentative brush of lips, a hesitant test. It was a kiss built from months of repressed longing, of quiet affection that had been growing stronger with every passing day. The rain slid down their faces, mixing together. His kiss was cool from the rain, warm from his breath, filled with an unmistakable reverence and devotion, soft against her lips, yet firm and unyielding, like he never wanted to let go. Leah's mind went completely blank, her body frozen in place, her lashes trembling violently. A heartbeat later, she closed her eyes, wrapping her arms tight around his waist, lifting herself higher on her tiptoes, and kissed him back. The rain poured down, washing over the land, washing away every last bit of uncertainty and distance between them. The smoke from the fire was slowly doused by the rain, lightning occasionally lighting up the night sky. The only sounds on the farm were the rain, the pounding of their hearts, and the soft, desperate press of their lips together. The feelings they'd buried for so long exploded in that moment, unbridled and raw. No grand declaration, no careful build-up. Just a terrifying fire, a torrential storm, and a kiss neither of them could hold back any longer. They pulled apart slowly, who knew how much later. Their foreheads pressed together, their breaths mixing, rain dripping from their hair, forming a thin curtain between them. Logan's thumb brushed her lower lip gently, his voice low and tender, every word clear and unshakable in the rain. "Leah, I don't want to just be your farmhand anymore. I want to stay by your side. To look after you, to protect this farm, to protect this home." Leah opened her eyes, staring into his deep gaze, tears mixing with the rain as they fell down her cheeks. But she was smiling, brighter than he'd ever seen her. She nodded hard, her voice wobbly with tears but unshakably sure. "Logan? Me too." The storm still raged around them, but the whole world felt warm, bright, and safe. The barn was gone, but their hearts had been bound together tight and unbreakable in that moment. Logan pulled her back into his arms, holding her tight, like he wanted to merge her into his very bones. Leah pressed her cheek to his soaked chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart, wrapped in the warmth and safety of his embrace. All the fear, all the exhaustion melted away completely. She knew, from this rainy night on, she would never be alone again. With him by her side, no storm, no hardship, no uncertain future would ever scare her again. The thunder faded into the distance, the storm clouds slowly breaking apart, a faint glimmer of light peeking through on the horizon. The rain eased, falling soft and gentle on the wheat fields, a quiet, soothing rustle in the dark. Logan let her go, taking off his soaked jacket and wrapping it around her shoulders, shielding her from the cold rain. He laced his fingers through hers, their palms pressed together, and walked slowly back to the main house, step by step. Their footprints left deep marks in the mud, a path leading toward the future. The porch light glowed warm and yellow through the rain, illuminating their silhouettes side by side. No grand sweeping vows, no fancy romantic gestures. Just a storm, a fire, a kiss from the heart, and a love that had found its home quiet and sure in the Montana wheat fields. From that night on, Leah and Logan had finally confessed their feelings, binding their lives together. The quiet tenderness hidden in the silence, the steady protection woven into the small moments, had finally bloomed into something beautiful on that stormy, rainy night. Chapter 10: Shadows in the Heat of Love. After that kiss in the stormy night, every inch of the air at the Carter farm seemed wrapped in soft, sweet honey. The two of them, who had once moved in quiet and spoken harmony, had finally torn down that thin, fragile wall between them. Their love spilled unapologetically into every corner of their daily lives. When they fed the cattle together at dawn, Logan would sneak a soft kiss to the top of Leah's head when old Joe wasn't looking. When they repaired the farm equipment in the wheat fields at midday, he'd slow his movements on purpose, just to stand beside her a little longer. When they sat on the porch in the evening, she'd lean naturally against his shoulder, and he'd wrap an arm gently around her waist. No words needed to be spoken, just being close, quiet, and nestled together was enough to make their hearts feel full. The farm was still as busy as ever, but the days had grown unexpectedly sweet. Logan fussed over Leah with unwavering care. He never let her lift a finger for the heavy, back-breaking work. When the weather turned cold, he'd set her coat by the door ahead of time. When she grew tired going over the books late at night, he'd quietly make a mug of hot milk and set it in her hands. With every ounce of his thoughtfulness and tenderness, he slowly filled the void of warmth that had lingered in her life for the past 2 years. Leah, in turn, let down every last one of her hard defensive shells. With him, she could be silly, vulnerable, and free from the need to put on a brave face. She'd gush to him about the little things with a bright smile, curl up in his arms and be playful, and knead the tension from his tight shoulders when he was tired. Old Joe saw it all, grinning from ear to ear every day, always making excuses to leave them alone together. The whole farm was filled with warm, bright domestic bliss. And Logan's skills, now that they were in love, were poured into Leah's life without reservation. He completely restructured the farm's operations, sorting the messy ledgers into immaculate order, cutting out inefficient expenses, renegotiating new grain sales channels, and even reaching out to the state's organic certification board on his own initiative. His plan was to brand the Carter Farm's wheat as a high-end organic product, doubling its selling price overnight. The sales troubles that had once left Leah tearing her hair out were solved effortlessly in his hands. The farm's income climbed steadily with each passing day, the exhaustion fading from her face, replaced by a brighter, more frequent smile. To replace the barn lost in the fire, Logan drew up the blueprints himself and hired the most reliable construction crew. In just 10 short days, a new, sturdier, more spacious barn was built, complete with fireproof and moisture-proof features. On the day it was finished, Leah stood in front of the brand-new building, looking at Logan's sunlit profile, and felt a warm burn in the back of her eyes. She'd once thought she'd be fighting this battle alone for the rest of her life, scraping by under the weight of debt and pressure. But now there was a man who took her struggles as his own, who saw her home as his own destiny, who held her future carefully in the palm of his hand. "What are you thinking about?" Logan brushed a crumb of bread from the corner of her mouth, his voice soft. Leah looked up at him, smiling, her eyes crinkling into 2 beautiful crescent moons. "I'm thinking about how lucky I was to find you that rainy night." Logan leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I'm the lucky one. You brought me home." The sweetness of new love wrapped around them like a tide, but beneath that soft warmth, an unseen shadow was slowly creeping in. It came in the form of the anonymous calls Logan received every now and then. The calls came from no fixed number, just a jumble of meaningless digits flashing across the screen every time it rang. At first, Leah hadn't thought anything of it, writing them off as ordinary sales or spam calls. But as they happened more and more often, she slowly started to notice that something was wrong. Every time that specific ringtone sounded, Logan changed in an instant. The warm, smiling look in his eyes would turn icy cold in a heartbeat, the air around him growing sharp and heavy. His relaxed shoulders would tense up, and even the hand holding hers would tighten without him realizing it. He'd immediately walk away from her, his back to her as he took the call. His voice dropped so low she could barely hear it. There was a hard, cold edge to his tone she'd never heard before, occasionally punctuated by short, sharp sentences in a clipped, frigid tone. She couldn't make out the words, but she could feel the suppressed frustration and impatience in every syllable. After every call, he'd fall silent for a long time. The warm light in his eyes would grow deep and unreadable, the smile gone from his face entirely, wrapped in a thick, heavy cloud of tension. Even when he smiled at her, even when he took her hand gently, Leah could feel it clearly. He was hiding something, a secret she couldn't touch. The first time it happened, Leah hadn't asked. She'd thought it was just trouble with work, or a hiccup with the sales channels. She didn't want to add to his stress, only wanting to stay quietly by his side. But as the anonymous calls grew more frequent, from once every few days to once or twice a day, Logan's mood swings grew more pronounced, and the unease in her heart grew like a vine, winding tighter and tighter around her chest. That evening, the two of them were sitting on the porch with mugs of hot coffee, watching the sun sink slowly behind the Rocky Mountains. Logan had just leaned down, about to kiss her forehead, when his phone vibrated in his pocket. That specific ringtone blared out once more. His movements froze instantly, his face falling. "I need to take this," he said, pulling his arm from around her waist, a faint, unmissable urgency in his tone. He turned and walked quickly into the depths of the wheat field, his back to her, his voice lowered as he spoke. Leah sat where she was, her fingers tightening around the coffee mug. The sunset light fell over her, but it couldn't warm the faint chill creeping up from the bottom of her heart. She watched his tall, lonely silhouette, the tight line of his jaw every now and then, the way he stood alone in the wind for a long, long time after hanging up the phone. The questions and unease in her chest could no longer be contained. Who was he talking to on the phone? Who was on the other end of the line? What was in those conversations that made him turn cold in an instant? She thought back to when they'd first met, him unconscious in the rainy night, no ID, no name, refusing to speak a word of his past. She thought of the skills he'd shown, far beyond those of an ordinary farmhand, his knowledge of agriculture, machinery, management, how a single call had brought in top experts from California, how he'd arranged for a helicopter to airdrop pesticides, how he'd effortlessly solved problems that had stumped everyone in town. She thought of the innate calm and authority he'd carried at the harvest festival, something no ordinary person could possess. She thought of the way he'd occasionally spoken of his weariness of a life laid out for him, down to the smallest detail. Countless loose threads wove together in her mind, forming a vague, mysterious shape. Logan was absolutely not a simple man, just running from a life he didn't want. He was hiding a huge secret, one he wouldn't tell her, one he wouldn't even let her touch. And those anonymous calls were the tendrils of that secret, reaching into their quiet, peaceful life. Logan hung up the phone and stood in the wind for a long time, slowly steadying his emotions before turning and walking back to the porch. A warm smile was back on his face, and he sat down beside her like he always did, reaching out to wrap an arm around her shoulder. But Leah shifted slightly, pulling away from his touch without thinking. Logan's hand froze in midair, the smile fading from his eyes. He'd picked up on her unease instantly. "What's wrong?" he said, his voice soft, a faint, careful edge to it. Leah looked up at him, into his deep eyes, and asked quietly, "Who was that on the phone just now?" A flicker crossed Logan's gaze, and he looked away from her, his voice as casual as he could make it. "It's nothing. Just a sales call. Annoying, that's all." Another lie. Just like every other time she'd asked. Vague, dismissive, skirting around the heart of the matter. Leah's heart sank just a little. She didn't call him out on it. She just looked down at the coffee swirling gently in her mug, her voice as light as the wind. "Logan, we're together now, aren't we?" "We are," he answered immediately, his voice firm. "Then is there something you can't tell me?" She lifted her head again, her eyes glistening with hurt, with unease, with a careful, tentative question. "Those calls aren't sales calls." I can hear it in you. Every time you hang up, you're upset, you're carrying something. Are you hiding something from me? Logan's chest ached sharply when he saw the clear unease and hurt in her eyes. He reached out to take her hand, his voice thick with apology. Leah, I'm not trying to hide things from you on purpose. It's complicated. I don't want to drag you into it. I don't want you to worry. But we're partners, Leah's voice cracked slightly. If you're in trouble, I can carry it with you. If you're hurting, I can face it with you. When you lock everything away inside and carry it alone, it makes me feel uneasy. Scared. Like I never really got into your heart at all. She didn't care if his past was messy, if his background was ordinary, if he had secrets he was ashamed to speak of. What scared her was the lies, the distance, the wall between them that she couldn't climb over. Logan's heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, the pain sharp and unrelenting. He knew his secrecy was making her feel unsafe. He knew those sudden calls were a thorn in the side of their sweet, happy life. He knew more than anything that the secret he carried was a ticking time bomb, one that could destroy the rare, warm peace he'd found here at any moment. But he couldn't tell her. Not yet, at least. He was terrified that once he spoke of who he really was, of everything he carried on his shoulders, this bright, pure girl, as luminous as the Montana starlight, would be scared away. That she'd pull back from him, think he'd been lying to her from the very start. He'd fought so hard for this life for her. He couldn't risk it. Trust me, okay? Logan took her hand, his palm trembling faintly with a cool chill, his voice utterly sincere. Just give me a little more time. Once I sort everything out, I'll tell you everything. Every last part of it. Until then, don't overthink it. Don't be scared. I'm not leaving you. Ever. His eyes were too sincere, his voice too firm, his grip on her hand too tight. Leah looked at him, and the unease and hurt in her heart ultimately lost out to the love and trust she had for him. She nodded softly, not asking any more questions, and just squeezed his hand back tight. Okay. I'll wait for you. Logan let out a quiet breath, pulling her gently into his arms and holding her tight, like he wanted to merge her into his very bones. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the faint scent of wheat on her skin, but his heart was heavy. On the other end of those calls was the endless pressure and demands from his family, the identity and responsibility he couldn't outrun, a net that was slowly closing in around him. He thought he could hide away here in the wheat fields, by her side, escape it all for a little while. But his family's hunt had never stopped. Those calls were warnings, ultimatums, threats. They were forcing him to go back. Forcing him to face everything he'd run from. Logan closed his eyes, making a silent vow to himself. He'd sort this all out, and fast. He wouldn't let the dirty, ugly politics of his world touch her, disturb this quiet farm, ruin the sweet happiness they'd built together. But he didn't know that once a shadow falls, it doesn't fade away easily. The sweetness of their new love still wrapped around them, but the shadow from his past had already fallen between them, growing thicker, clearer with every passing day, like a storm brewing on the far horizon. The porch light flickered on, its warm yellow glow wrapping around the two of them in each other's arms. Leah pressed herself against Logan's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat, but a faint, persistent unease still lingered in the back of her mind, refusing to fade. She trusted him. She was willing to wait for him. But she didn't know what exactly he was waiting for, what earth-shattering secret he was waiting to lay bare. The night deepened. The Montana stars still blazed bright overhead, but beneath that brilliance, Logan's secret sat like a heavy stone on both their hearts, lingering, impossible to shake off.